Hi, everybody. Long time no see. This is Fantasy Baseball on Deck, and this is your guy, Austin. This episode, we're going to talk about some free agent observations that I've had that I feel like are meaningful to you all as the fantasy baseball community and myself. We're going to talk about roster manipulation strategies that have come up to surface as more and more rotations across baseball inflict or feel injuries more and more as we go along. And then also trade targets uncovering guys that I feel are more valuable than their box score or from a fantasy perspective is showing. So as always, we will start off with how I'm doing. League number one, the weird one where all the points are kind of doubled and no pitchers, it's like impossible for them to get negative points. I had number 2 in points for. I was number 1 even just like a couple days ago, but wanted to kind of go over kind of the successes and the failures associated with this league. Not really many failures given that the owner or the commissioner changes the rules every single year. It doesn't tell anybody. This year specifically, he somehow got the number 1 overall pick for Shohei Ohtani, and then also added and forced everyone to have a bench slot so that when Shohei Ohtani goes down to starting pitching position, he has a bench slot to fill in. So it's going to be really hard to beat this guy at the top by 1,000 points. But that is still the goal with everybody else. And I'm kind of well on my way, at least with the bottom half of the league, but it's still early. So points for by tomorrow with how well I did tonight. I'll be back in number 1, but it doesn't really happen or doesn't really cycle until the next day. Anyways, what can we control? Total bases and innings pitched and strikeouts are kind of like the most important things that I feel like we can really control with our structure of our team. In this league specifically, there's obviously bonuses for power across every fantasy baseball league, but having a really fast roster is also a big bonus. There's 4 points per stolen base in this league. So I made sure that I had a very fast team per se. And then pitching wise, making sure that I'm getting guys that are getting quality innings while also striking out batters at a very good clip. So if I look across points for, again, I am going to be number 1 as of tomorrow. If I look at the power bonus, 3rd in home runs, I am down the way in RBIs. Mentioned that I'm fairly fast, even though I'm pretty low in runs too. The difference here is that stolen bases, I am far and away the fastest team. Talk about 54 stolen bases times 4. I have 200 points just in that category alone. It's good to know the rules of your league. Innings pitched, I am surpassing my peers, or at least I should continue to kind of pull away. Again, this character right here manipulated the rules and gave himself the number 1 overall pick. So it's gonna be tough to beat him in every regard. I keep trying to trade for Shohei Ohtani. Won't give him to me because he's smart. But anyways, innings pitched, leading in that number 1 overall. And then going to strikeouts, I have 40 more strikeouts than the next guy. And over 100, hundreds more than even down the way. So these are really the main categories that you want to make sure that you are leading in to really differentiate yourself from the rest of your group and the things that we kind of want to focus on, because we can't control runs and RBIs, but we can control quality hits, meaning home runs, extra base hits, total bases, innings pitched, and strikeouts, making sure we have guys on our roster that are always acquiring those at a good clip. Anyways, all right, so off to the next league. I am number 1 in this league with points for. How am I doing specifically in total bases? I am second by 1 total base overall. So look forward to maybe even taking that back over as of tomorrow. RBIs wise, number 1. Runs, I'm a little down the way, 4th overall. And if I go over to stolen bases, 2nd behind whatever. I don't need to talk about the teams. 2nd overall stolen bases, but again, innings pitched, number 1 by a good 10 innings or so, and then strikeouts well ahead of my peers by 60 strikeouts so far this season. And this is something that will continue to, again, differentiate me away from my peers, because again, the strikeouts are super duper important to keeping people off of bases, keeping people from stealing 1st to 2nd, and overall giving up runs. So strikeouts, very, very important, as I've always said before. And again, number 1 in points for. I mentioned before that I want to go over the important free agency movements and trends. So picked up Nolan Gorman a long time ago. He's been wildly he has not been frustrating. The overall St. Louis Cardinals organization as a whole have been mind-boggling, to say the least. They have their best players coming up both as batters and starting pitchers, and they've been doing things that are very confusing. So specifically starting off with Nolan Gorman, he's number 2 overall at his position at second base, even though he has around 30 to 40 less at bats than Marcus Semien, who is the number 1 second baseman, and always leads the league in plate appearances and at bats. But a good 40 points behind Marcus Semien in that second base category. But again, kind of hitting on the head. He's somehow only still 66% rostered across all of leagues. He is extra important. He's also gaining third base eligibility. So though Nolan Arenado got tossed from tonight's game, probably for arguing balls and strikes, Nolan actually transitioned over to third base, and he's usually getting 1 start per week at third base, especially during the weeks where they have 7 or more games in a row, to give Nolan Arenado a break, a rest. So when Nolan Arenado shifts over to the DH slot, Nolan has been getting reps at that third base slot. So right now he's got 7 appearances at third base as of tonight. He needs 3 more appearances to gain that third base eligibility, which makes him all that more flexible and valuable kind of moving forward. So if somehow Nolan Gorman, the guy who is hitting the 3 slot for the St. Louis Cardinals, is available in your league, should have added him a month ago. I've been gone for a month, so I got to take some credit for that. But that's a super valuable grab. Grab him if he's available. And we're moving on to the next player. And I'll just talk about specifically the St. Louis Cardinals and like why they're doing things that they're doing. Obviously came in with an outfield issue and even as well as an infield issue. The team is so confusing. Jordan Walker, number 1 prospect overall in minor league baseball, comes up, only really succeeds as the best defender from an outfield perspective on roster, gets demoted, hitting like 270, 280 or something like that, just to manipulate his contract and mess him up from a mental perspective. Nolan Gorman he's a left-handed hitter. He gets sat. He was getting sat against a lot of left-handed hitters or pitchers, but when he is starting, he's hitting the 3-hole and their most productive batter so far this season. So pretty confusing. They also brought in Matthew Liberatore, who is my next player that I want to talk about. He has been a top 100 prospect for the last 4 seasons. So since 2019, he has been working up his way. He is 23 years old. So since he was 19 years old, he has in 2019, he has been a top 100 prospect, has kind of flirted with the majors, coming up and down and up and down, comes up and makes a really good start. He goes 5 innings pitched, 7 strikeouts, 0 earned runs, earns a win at the required 1.20 whip average, whip number. So walks and hits per innings pitched. We always want that number to be 1.20 or below to make sure that we have a sustainable player that's keeping people off of base and therefore not incurring as many earned runs against them. So comes up, has a really good start against Milwaukee. 4 days later, comes out of the bullpen against the Dodgers, kind of in a meaningless spot, and kind of derails his whole thought concept of his next start. So ideally, Matthew Liberatore is going to be in the rotation, but we do not really know at this point, given all of St. Louis's blunders from an administrative perspective. They're really, really mismanaging all of their young players to a point that's laughable at this point, but not if you're a St. Louis fan. He came out of the bullpen 4 days after his first start, much anticipated productive player. Wilson Contreras got announced there, St. Louis's catcher Wilson Contreras got announced that he's going to be the full-time DH, and then just days later that got revoked. So he's back to catching. Jordan Walker gets sent to the minors. They set Nolan Gorman against left-handed pitchers as a 23-year-old kid. If he's not going to, again, if he's not going to figure out how to hit left-handed pitchers early in his career, when is he ever going to figure it out? So overall, if you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan, I would be super frustrated. But me being a Reds fan, I can't afford to not love the fact that they're just completely botching the season, given that they had World Series hopes coming out of the National League. So now that we're done with St. Louis Cardinals talk, for whatever reason, that's why I decided to go down that route. We are going to go to the Los Angeles Angels. Mickey Moniak, as a high schooler, actually, back in 2016, was the first overall pick. First round, first overall pick by the Philadelphia Phillies, gets traded to the Los Angeles Angels. So now, fast forward all the way back from 2016, he is now a 25-year-old individual, and he is basically leading off all of the days that he starts and gets playing time. If we look down through here, but essentially like every 4 days or so, he gets benched for Taylor Ward, who has been the traditional leadoff guy. But even when they both do play at the same time, Taylor Ward and Mickey Moniak are basically leading off and hitting second. So in the past, Mickey Moniak, no matter what, when he plays, he's going to be he's been the leadoff guy. And then Taylor Ward slots down to the number 2 slot. Taylor Ward, even tonight in their game against Boston, actually like pinch hit for him at the very end of the game and hit a double. So it's kind of confusing to see like what their playing time is going to look like. But the fact that he hit another home run tonight, if he was to continue this pace for an entire season, he would be a 35+ home run guy. And then he's starting off super hot, hitting 429. And, been very, very productive, averaging 4.1 across the ESPN standard leagues so far this season. So this is a guy to absolutely kind of keep your eye on. If he continues to play, let's say 6 out of 7 days, I'd say that he is worth finding a slot in your roster, depending on what your outfield situation is. And then going down to Bobby Miller with the LA Dodgers. So the LA Dodgers, we talked about before this season started, they were going to have a soft 7-man rotation, meaning that they just had so much talent to work with. They were going to be bringing pitchers in, taking them out, sending them to the bullpen, back and forth, load management. But now it's to a point where they've had so many injuries, with both Dustin May and Julio Urias also going down on the IL for a significant amount of time, that their rotation has now been limited to Tony Gonsolin, Noah Syndergaard, Gavin Stone, who made his first MLB start just this last week. And he is the number 44 overall prospect in all of baseball. So a very significant name. He got bumped around a little bit, but he was probably thrust into that major league rotation a little quicker than they wanted to. And Bobby Miller, who is the number 19 overall prospect in Major League Baseball this year, actually started tonight, had a really good game, 5 innings pitched, 5 strikeouts, 1 earned run, and a win. But even more important than that, he was allowed to throw 95 pitches tonight. So, a lot of times with these young guys, super touted, big prospects, they're limited from a volume perspective, which really limits their fantasy ceiling, given that they're not allowed to, achieve the 100, pitches per game that we're looking for. But the fact that Bobby Miller's first start ever as a Dodger got to 95 pitches with that production, really, really awesome to look forward to. And again, Bobby Miller down here, he is currently 9.8% owned, and he is, if we're looking at prospect grades, he pretty much had the exact same grades as a Taj Bradley with the Tampa Bay Rays so far this year. Taj Bradley's been really successful to start the season. I think last night he got roughed up, or tonight even he got roughed up a little bit, but overall it's been, you can kind of like project that sort of consistency across these two players. Very, very similar scouting grades, age, and all of the above. So Bobby Miller is a guy that I think that we can put some decent stock into, but this is a situation where like you probably have a solid pitching roster. This is a situation where there's a lot of honestly like a lot of pretty solid pitching options available in free agency across most leagues, of guys getting brought up. for whatever reason. So always be looking to trade two people away for a higher value to a higher quality player so that you can slot in these guys before they become super popular. You miss out on them just because you weren't able to make a roster change. Anyways, literally trying to get through this. Clayton Kershaw's on bereavement. That is the other player with the Dodgers to make up that now that 5-man rotation. So we can expect Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone both to get consistent playing time in that rotation because they just don't have anyone to turn to as of right now. Brian Pepois and Walker Buehler are still injured and very much still working their way back. So we're going on to Tanner Houck and kind of a mixture of like Tanner Houck with Garrett Whitlock into consideration. Boston is either going to move to a 6-man rotation or move Tanner Houck to the bullpen like they did last year. It seems like deja vu, a similar situation, but we didn't expect James Paxton to come back and look the way that he has throughout the beginning of this season coming back from rehab. So they're paying James Paxton too much money to DFA him or put him into the bullpen. So Tanner Houck, if they're given this situation, he hasn't been super awesome from an ERA perspective this season. He had his best start of the year just this past evening, but still only carrying a 4.99 ERA, while his whip isn't too bad, 1.25. We're looking for a 1.20 or smaller. He's just getting hit a lot all at once. It's like he'll go through the lineup a couple of times, and that third round through, he'll get absolutely smacked for a run of like 5 runs. So like he'll get into the 5th inning with no 4 innings pitched, no earned runs, and let's say like 6 strikeouts. And then he'll get into that 5th inning facing the lineup the third way through, and then he gets absolutely just knocked around for 5 runs and gets yanked out of the ball game, and then ends up getting a loss or something. So he's got a really, really interesting career to start out his career, but still a super duper young guy, and is most likely getting transitioned to the bullpen. But what is important about this is that Garrett Whitlock, again, as I mentioned before, is coming back, and he's specifically supposed to start on Saturday. So Tanner Houck's not going to start again until maybe early next week, given that they have an off day on Thursday and Monday with being the Red Sox. So going to get transitioned to the bullpen. Maybe he'll come out of the bullpen, maybe he won't. But this is probably the most valuable Tanner Houck will be, given that he had his best start of the year, last time out. Tanner Houck is not very valuable from a standard leagues perspective. So in this league, he is only ranked at 25 overall, but in this other league that I play in, if I was to go to my team and scroll down to Tanner Houck, this league that really it's kind of impossible for pitchers to get negative points. As you can see, like Spencer Strider and JP France both had 57 and 50 points. And then even Dylan Covey had 40 points tonight. If I look at Tanner Houck's overall production so far this year for all of relief pitcher primary pitchers, he's actually the 5th overall pitcher. So this is a guy that I'm going to try to get rid of while he is still a top 5 pitcher at his niche RP slot. So that's enough for Tanner Houck. I am moving on to the other guy I just mentioned, Dylan Covey. And Dylan Covey is not as much a player that I'm recommending to you, but more of a concept. So Matt Strahm this year has really only succeeded. I thought that he should have stayed in the pitching rotation this year with the Philadelphia Phillies. He did nothing but succeed. 33 innings pitched, 47 strikeouts. He carries a 2.73 ERA and got transitioned to the bullpen. Whatever. So the Phillies are doing what they're going to do. We can't control any of these things. But with Matt Strahm, he actually acted as the opener today. And the value of finding pitchers who are going to be openers is valuable. So Matt Strahm was the starting pitcher for today, expected to go 1 or 2 innings. And he ended up going 2 innings against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And he gets pulled out of the game as expected after probably throwing 30 pitches or so. Dylan Covey was the very much listed as the primary pitcher to take over after Matt Strahm. So after Matt Strahm worked 2 innings as the opener, Covey comes in. So what is the value of Covey? Well, if he's coming in the 3rd inning, as we can expect him to either come in the 2nd or the 3rd, 2 things happen. Number one, if he pitches at least 3 innings, gets the 5th inning, and the Phillies were to be ahead, he's in line for a win. But what's more, what we can really more control, and kind of it's not cheat, but it's roster manipulation to a T, is that Dylan Covey got me in this league specifically, scored me 40 points today, going 5 innings. So he went from the 3rd inning all the way to the 7th inning today. And the value of that is that he didn't take up a game started against me. So if I was to go to this this matchup, this league is really, really interesting from a roster restriction perspective, but also a game started restriction. So per week, I can only have 10 games started for my starting pitchers. So because I was able to find someone like a Dylan Covey to actually pitch most of the game, go 5 innings after that opener, I was able to get a starting pitcher production out of him, a free 40 points essentially, without using one of my games started. So of my points that I had of today, Spencer Strider obviously started out the game with the Braves, so he counts as a game started against. Also, JP France started for the Astros against Milwaukee. He was a start against me, but because Dylan Covey didn't come in until the 3rd inning, he was expected to pitch that day a starting pitching load, but was after an opener. He is a free 40 points for me, and I'm still on track to not max out my game started. And anyways, if you max out, so if I was to get 10 games against me before the end of Saturday, that Sunday, I would not have an opportunity to earn any points from my starting pitcher. So we want to make sure that we are always setting ourselves up to go into Sunday with multiple pitchers, that we surpass that 10 games started with the opportunity to add people that day if we need to, if it's a close game, to make sure that we surpass. So just kind of an idea with roster manipulations. If you guys have strict game started restrictions, kind of like I do in this league, keeping track of, making sure, between now, looks like the Phillies are doing this. The Tampa Bay Rays have done this forever. Finding the Tampa Bay Rays pitcher who is expected to come in like after a Yanni Chirinos or a Josh Fleming or, whatever, whoever's supposed to open up will be listed as the primary opener, but getting that pitcher right after is like free points without taking on, again, that really valuable game started figure. So it's not a way of cheating, but it's a way of manipulating your roster to get the most points possible. So now I want to go into players that I think are trade worthy. Like, this is pretty much big game hunting. But these are the kind of the guys that I feel like are leading the pack, but very much under the radar in a lot of ways. So do not focus necessarily on Marcus Stroman. I just start off talking about Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette is what I want you to focus on. And I kind of bunched everyone together here to sort of give you a visual per se. So Bo Bichette so far this season is the number 2 overall shortstop in scoring behind Wander Franco. So he's not even number 1 guy as a shortstop so far this season. But overall across the league, he is number 3 in total bases. And total bases, again, is the true measure of offensive production as an individual. No matter if you have runners on base, if you have nobody on base all of the time, if you play for the number 1 scoring Texas Rangers, or if you play for the lowest scoring team, Oakland Athletics, it really is just a true measure of who is the most individually productive player. Total bases is the most important number to me, while also keeping in your mind the importance of stolen bases as well, because those are two truly independent stats. But if we go back up here and just kind of focus on the importance of Bo Bichette right now. So Bo Bichette right now, and let's just compare him against Wander Franco. So comparing him against Wander Franco, and I swear that I added Wander to this, but we'll do this. This is great. A great viewing experience. I should have had this already up there. So if I'm comparing Bo Bichette and Wander Franco, and I should have had them next to each other, I'm messing up. Here we go. Wander Franco number 1 in scoring, but Bo Bichette has 11 more total bases. He has 1 more run, and he has 7 more RBIs on the season. Total base wise, again, he's had 11 more total bases than Wander Franco, but has been outscored so far this season. But this really shows the importance of Wander Franco's ability to steal bases. The ability to steal bases really makes you more independent, because the more, regardless of how successful you are, if you're getting on base, if you're able to independently steal yourself to second base, put yourself into scoring position, you can make yourself more valuable to your teammates to earn those bonus runs that we can't necessarily forecast. But if you're able to steal bases, by default, you're putting yourself independently in a better position to earn those bonus points. And that's why Wander Franco, even though he has hit 11 less total bases so far this season, has outproduced Bichette to start the year. That's not as important information as I want to focus on while comparing him to a guy like Marcus Semien. So again, overall in the entire season across all batters, if I clear this search, comparing Bichette against every batter in Major League Baseball so far this year, he is the third most productive individual hitter, not taking stolen bases out of the consideration. Just looking at individual production, Bichette is number 3 behind Freddie Freeman and Ronald Acuna Jr. So I want to, a lot of times we have second base, shortstop eligibility guys. I think it's really important to sort of compare Bichette versus Marcus Semien. So why am I doing this? And it really, to sort of illustrate the importance of these bonus points that we can't forecast or really like depend on. They're valuable, but we can't do anything about it, kind of thing. It's just like we have to assume that if we draft a player for what they are, we're not drafting Jake Cronenworth because he's surrounded by 3 possible MVPs. We're drafting Jake Cronenworth because we think that he's a good player. Specifically, that's why I would highlight it in red in all of my draft sheets, because I don't think Jake Cronenworth individually is a very independent player. Instead, I expect him where he hits on base, not a super fast individual, doesn't hit for super high power, but he hits in the top 4, top 5 of that lineup every single day. So by default, he's going to earn a ton of the bonus points that we can't really project. That's why I don't like Jake Cronenworth. But looking at Bichette versus Marcus Semien, Bichette has 9 more total bases than Marcus Semien, so individually a more productive player. Semien has 15 more runs, 9 more RBIs, 6 more stolen bases. So that's an independent stat that's important. But on the entire season so far this year, he has scored 34 more points than Marcus Semien has scored 34 more points than Bichette, even though Bichette has individually produced more than him from a total base perspective. This is kind of this is me uncovering someone who is undervalued and kind of comparing him to someone who is overvalued. So Marcus Semien, to me, even though he is going to lead the league in plate appearances, at bats, play every single day, he's probably going to hit again for, let's say, 28 to 30 more, 30 home runs for the season. He just overall is not as independently productive as Bichette, but so much stretched out to the point where he is the number 1 second baseman in all of Major League Baseball. And I think that if we look at just points scored on the entire season, he's 4th, not including Shohei Ohtani, the cheat code, but Ronald Acuna Jr. and Freddie Freeman are the only 2 players to technically score more points across standard leagues than Marcus Semien. But if we look at his overall total base rank, go all the way down here to, let's say, like outside of the top 10. He's not even in the top 10 in individual production, but he is the 4th overall scorer. So again, this is something that if you're a Marcus Semien owner, don't undervalue him. Just understand that you might be able to trade him away now, being that this might be his highest value given how many runs they've scored just in the last week. The Rangers are on our kind of a offensive historic run right now, and you might be able to take advantage of it. But also, if you're a Bichette owner, don't undervalue him. He's though he's scoring 34 less points than Marcus Semien, he is more productive than Marcus Semien, and those averages and that mean will level out throughout the year. And that's kind of what I'm trying to highlight. Same thing with Bichette and Ronald Acuna Jr. They are only separated by 8 total bases, but like the fact that Acuna Jr. is hitting at the top of the lineup, and so many of these stats are so lucky. Obviously, he's had a lot of stolen bases so far this year, so that really makes him a more independent player. But just the fact that there's only 8 total bases separating them so far this year, but there's 59 points scored on the entire season. It kind of shows, how misconstrued the data can look sometimes. So that is what I want to say about Bichette. I think Bichette's a player that you absolutely should trade for. I think he's undervalued for his, for his production. Same thing with Luis Robert. So Luis Robert Jr. is currently the fourth overall in Major League Baseball in total bases on the entire year. He is second in outfielders in total bases, and he is the number 10 overall, actually, like, score just for his position. So if I go to outfielders and I scroll by just points scored, we look at Luis Robert, all of these people who he has individually outproduced, he has scored less than, except for Ronald Acuna Jr. So, or from a total basis perspective, individual production perspective. So I think that's just like looking at Luis Robert, opening his roster or opening his stats and seeing that he is the 10th overall outfielder. I think you could trade for him, and at a discount technically because of his perceived 10th overall outfield spot or rank instead of his really individual production second overall outfield rank. I think this is a guy that you could get for a discount while he's actually one of the more valuable players in all of Major League Baseball to start the year. And then we'll go on to our pitchers. Okay, so I talked about I have some doubles here. But anyways, I want to talk about Kevin Gausman. So Kevin Gausman with the Toronto Blue Jays is he's the 11th overall starting pitcher. So obviously he's just outside of the top 10. He's not necessarily going to be discounted, thrown away, but his overall production so far this year actually is like double or way more better than what he's actually. Geez, man, this is why I should do this more than once a month, because I start to bumble my words. Anyways, although Kevin Gausman's had a really, really good year this year, he hasn't had any run support. Just kind of had some bad luck when he has had starts. So he's only 2-3 from a win-loss perspective, but he's 11th overall in points right now. But the underlying stats that are important that we really want to focus on is that if we look at overall strikeouts, he's second in strikeouts on the season so far this year. He is fourth in innings pitched. And if we take away the value of wins and losses away from everyone, so if we subtract everyone's wins and we add back their losses, because these are metrics that we can't forecast because we never know how much run support Kevin Gausman's going to get every time he goes out on the hill. He actually bumps up to the sixth most valuable pitcher from an actual value perspective, taking away those dependent stats of just wins and losses. So though he is number 11 right now and he won't be discounted per se, he is actually the sixth most productive pitcher. And I think that anyone would have a chance at kind of maybe scooping him away for less than he's worth because of these perceived value stats of being only the 11th overall in points. Next, I want to talk about Logan Webb and similar kind of concept. Right now, he's 20th overall in points. He's 15th in strikeouts. He's number 2 overall right now in innings pitched. You can always depend that he's going to throw 100 pitches or more per game, and playing in that big San Francisco stadium doesn't give up a ton of runs, and he really had a really rough start to begin the year. So he's been climbing his way back. His most recent starts really over the last month have been pretty darn consistent. And I think this is another player, again, because he's ranked 20th overall in points. I think you could steal him away, given that he's actually the 13th most valuable pitcher in all of Major League Baseball so far this season. Given taking away, again, the points lost from losses and then adding the points back from losses and taking away the points gained from wins, so that everyone's kind of on the same plane. Logan Webb, I think, was another player that you can target and get a lot out of. And I really don't, I don't know if anyone talks about how valuable Shohei Ohtani is. So I want to, again, sort of like really focus on the importance of Shohei. So I think I got to skip over a tab here. If I was to compare Shohei so far this season as a batter and as a hitter, or a batter, and this is stupid, batter and a pitcher, he would be comparable to a Bichette and or a Luis Robert. So as a batter, he is 9th overall in points and hitting. He's 6th overall on total bases. He's 4th overall on total bases plus stolen bases. And again, combining all of those production metrics, he would be comparable to those guys that we just mentioned, a Bichette and a Luis Robert on the season, which is awesome. The fact that he's essentially a top 10 batter alone is so impressive. Now let's talk about the starting pitching metrics as well. Right now, he's 3rd overall in points as a pitcher alone, taking away his batting stats, because we see right here he scored 349 points. ESPN doesn't do a good job of separating his pitching stats and his batting stats individually to show those totals, so they just lump it all in together in a total. But so far this season, overall in points, he's 3rd, and he only pitches 1 per 6 days because the Los Angeles Angels have a 6-man rotation. So he doesn't even have the opportunity to earn as much volume as everyone else from a pitching perspective, but he is still 14th in innings pitched. He's 3rd in strikeouts, and he's 6th overall this season in K per 9, really measuring the value and production per inning sort of thing. So far this season, if you were to relate him to his peers from a pitching perspective, he is producing like a Garrett Cole and or a Spencer Strider for that position. Really trying to build the concept of how important and valuable Shohei Ohtani is. So he is a top 10 batter, a top 10 pitcher in one player. And I can't confess to you how silly it would be for you to trade this player away, because you never ever get the value back that you would having him on your roster for these reasons. So I just asked the question not too long ago. Again, this was a couple weeks back, to the person who had Shohei Ohtani in my league. And I said, hey, dream trade scenario, what would you want back for Shohei Ohtani? And wildly, what I received back was, I want Aaron Judge, Nestor Cortez, and Brandon Woodruff, who is on my IL, for the reasons of, they say, or like ESPN projects that Shohei Ohtani is going to score 955 points. So his thought process was, if I can get Aaron Judge, Nestor Cortez, and Brandon Woodruff, a top 20, Brandon Woodruff I had to trade for. He's a top 20 player, top 30 player overall, that's again extended on the IL. His thought process is, I need to get these players that equal the amount of Shohei Ohtani plus to make this trade worth it. But what's wrong here, and the thought process is, and what it should be, is that not only are you sending away Shohei Ohtani, you're bringing over 3 players that you have to essentially drop value for. And I'm getting back 1 player that's worth 3 guys, like essentially worth 3 players in this scenario. And that means all of the difference from a roster flexibility perspective. And you have to look at the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost would be, let's just say, like, so far that you look at these projections. Well, let's look at the actual production. So like the production since I've sent these players away. Aaron Judge, I sent away Aaron Judge, Nestor Cortez, and Brandon Woodruff. And Aaron Judge at 162 points, Cortez at 85. He really dropped off right after I traded him. And Brandon Woodruff had 39 points so far this year. If he would have continued on the stretch that he's had so far this season, I gave him a very generous 177-point valuation for where he would be at so far right now in this season. And if we do that with Brandon Woodruff, he would have scored 247 points out of this trade so far. Without Brandon Woodruff, it'd be a 247. With Brandon Woodruff healthy, he would have scored 424 points, trading away Shohei Ohtani. Me coming back, I had just the thought, like, well, if you want Aaron Judge, Nestor Cortez, and Brandon Woodruff all in the same trade, if you throw in George Kirby, the deal's done, whatever. And he said, absolutely, let's take it. So what did this do? I got back Shohei Ohtani, who obviously I can slot between my DH and my starting pitcher slot back and forth. So he's always generating value for me. Got George Kirby, who his stats really showed that he was keeping people off the base, but he was just had some bad looks from an unearned run perspective. And then I got rid of one of my IL guys to be able to slot in, one of my other players who had just gotten hurt, between, I think it was Jeffrey Springs at the time, who was injured, that I had to slot into the IL. But the second I was able to do that, I'm not dropping value to the free agency wolves. I'm able to pick up someone to slot in between. Didn't have many closers on my roster, so I added Carlos Estevez, who is now the number 2 overall relief pitcher in baseball so far. So if I look at it from my side, Shohei Ohtani so far, who scored 349 points, George Kirby at 139, and then Estevez is at 124. That's a 612 point production since the trade, or overall so far this season, and that's a difference of 188 points comparatively, because again, you have to look at the opportunity cost. He took on 2 active players and an IL slot. So we had to drop, and then sent away 2 active players. So we had to drop 1 player or just immediately slot in Brandon Woodruff into his IL slot, whatever. If Brandon Woodruff was healthy, it would still be worth it, because again, looking at the difference of production just from with Brandon Woodruff in with 177 point evaluation, very generous compared to the players I was able to get in return. It's still 188 point positive, 88 points in the positive. And my overall kind of message here is, whoever has Shohei Ohtani in your league, if it's you, never let him go for anything. If it's someone that's not on your roster, again, I gave up Aaron Judge, my number 1 overall, I was like the 4th pick or something. So I took Judge just to have him, because I've never had him in a league ever, and just thought to myself, contact the person who has Shohei Ohtani, who just lucked into the number 1 spot, and ask them the simple question: what is your ideal trade for him? They are going to come back with something. I wish that the guy in my other league would give me something. He just says he's not on the market, like not on the table, whatever. What's your Shohei? What is your dream trade for Shohei Ohtani? In this situation, it was just Aaron Judge, Nestor Cortez, and Brandon Woodruff, who was hurt. Even if it was Brandon Woodruff again, who was healthy, this would have been worth it 100 times over 100. And this really has changed my trajectory in this league by a decent amount per se. So that's the end of the episode. I hope that you guys found it valuable. Kind of jumbled up my words because I haven't done this in a while, but let me know what you think. I will try my best to answer questions. My life's been really weird recently, and it's a bad excuse, but I appreciate all your time and look forward to interacting with you as always. So love you lots. Bye.